Mr. Tyrone Dash is a proud native of Orangeburg, South Carolina. He was a frontline participant in the civil rights movement and among the first to integrate the schools in his hometown. He received his BS degree in mathematics from Benedict College and a master's in biostatistics from the Medical University of South Carolina. He also attended Virginia Commonwealth University, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Erskine Seminary School. Mr. Dash started his career as an engineer working with both E.I. DuPont and Southern Bell. After 9 years in the field, he decided that he could have a greater impact on disparate communities of color if he went into business for himself. Also, he's worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield as a system expert and an adjunct professor at the Citadel. Over the years, Mr. Dash has dedicated his life to inspiring others to learn more, do more, and become more. He has served on the board of directors for several nonprofit organizations and has been the recipient of a number of awards. He also has been instrumental in implementing various community projects in different cities. Mr. Dash presently serves as the minister at First African Evangelical Christian Church and the director of the First African Child Development Center. His work aims to save young children of color from academic failure and a life of crime. And he's thankful that he's been called on for this purpose. He's the owner of a restaurant in Orangeburg and also has some real estate interests in several cities. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce Mr. Dash, and now I'll turn it over to Mr. Tyrone Dash. Thanks a lot.
Well, good afternoon again. It is so good being here. I want to thank Dr. Baker, Professor Baker, for inviting me here to share with you and the College of Charleston family some of my life experience. It is truly an honor for me to be in your presence. As I give my speech, I hope I don't offend anyone, because I'm going to have to use a term that I very seldom use, and that term is called nigger. So please forgive me, I don't want to offend anyone. Professor Baker indicated to me she was teaching a new course on courage. When I look up the definition of courage, I see the following. Courage is the choice and willingness to confront agony, pain, danger, uncertainty, or intimidation. Well, I was blessed to have the opportunity to grow up in a family that demonstrated courage daily. On May 17, 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled segregated schools were unconstitutional. That was Brown versus the Board of Education. My parents then had to decide if they were going to sign a petition to force the public school system to integrate or not fight the status quo at all. They made the choice of signing the petition and was willing to accept the consequences for signing that petition. The consequences were very brutal for my family business. During that time period, there was an organization called the White Citizen Council that used economics to force families to remove their names off the petition. However, my father refused to remove his name off that petition. Consequently, he had to leave home during the week to work in Washington, D.C. and New York City to support our family. He was blackballed from getting other jobs throughout South Carolina. An effort was made to fire my mother as a school teacher. However, her principal protected her from being fired. Later, that principal lost her job. Seeing my father and my mother standing firm on their belief introduced me to what courage is all about. Living in Orangeburg as a young boy, I constantly saw and experienced conditions I did not like at all. When we traveled to other cities in the South, the conditions for blacks were deplorable. Let me give you a few examples. When we went shopping with my parents downtown and saw white children eating a nice, juicy hamburger sandwich and a hot dog sandwich, I wanted one, but I couldn't have one because I was black. When we went to movie theaters, we would see whites sitting in a nice area downstairs, well-maintained, while we blacks had to sit upstairs in an area that needed a lot of maintenance. Even though we had good teachers in the black community, we were given used textbooks and material from the white school, which means we were behind on some of the current educational standards. The only white-owned restaurant in Orangeburg that would sell food to blacks was the Dario. However, we had to go to a pigeonhole located behind the building while whites were allowed to go in and eat. The black leaders in Orangeburg made a decision to start the Orangeburg Civil Rights Movement in July of 1963 to eliminate the injustice we were confronted with. My father, mother, sisters, and I had the courage to put our lives on the line to participate in the movement. You know, I was really blessed to have a father that I had, because seeing my dad being courageous, being a courageous frontline civil rights leader, it inspired me to be just as courageous as he was. The desire for blacks to be free was paramount to me. This desire gave me courage as a little boy, 13 years old, to walk on the picket line in all types of adverse weather conditions. I was on the picket line almost every week, despite the life-threatening comments I was receiving from people passing by. The desire also gave me courage to go to jail several times as I participated in freedom marches. Attending mass rallies and singing freedom songs during the week always strengthened my desire to be free. The word of one of those songs in particular ran chills down my spine. The name of that song was "Oh Freedom, Oh Freedom." Let me share with you a sample of the words that really inspired me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. See, I was so committed to getting my freedom, I was prepared to die for it. The Civil Rights Act was signed into law on July 2nd, 1964. That was one of the happiest days of my life. It showed me that if you had courage to fight for what is right, you can win. You can win. I was so excited because I was finally free to do the same things white kids were able to do. I was looking forward to applying for jobs and not worried about being discriminated against. I was finally able to get me that juicy hot dog from Crest 5 and Dime store. we had the opportunity to get a quality education. During the summer of 1964, my two sisters and I, along with 10 other black children, volunteered to integrate the white high school in Orangeburg. This is when hell on earth started in my life. We were in meetings almost every day with lawyers, local and national civil rights leaders, preparing us for the first day of school and the subsequent days that would follow. We were given scenarios on how the students, teachers, and outsiders would respond to us. However, there was no way those folks were able to prepare us for the brutal and horrific experience we encountered. Finally, the first day of school arrived. I was so excited. We were escorted to school by the policemen and the National Guardsmen, and we rode on a special bus that was designated just for us. I can remember as a group, we started singing the 23rd Psalm as we traveled toward the school. However, our bus was stopped, and we were returning home that first day because there were many white people at that school waiting for us, and some of them was waiting possibly to hurt us. The second day, we arrived at school late, when all the students were already in their classroom. We were escorted to our individual classes by the National Guardsmen. When I walked in that classroom, my teacher pointed me to my seat. I was totally isolated from the rest of the students in the class. Every day, none of the students would talk to me unless they were calling me a nigger or some derogative term. When I walked down the corridor changing classes, often I had to duck because people were throwing rocks at me. If I accidentally brushed into someone, they would start screaming as if I had some type of contagious disease. Even the teacher used the word nigger in the classroom. The only time I was able to have a conversation with another student was at lunchtime. That is when all the black students would get together for lunch. If we sat at a table with other white students, they would get up and sit at another table. One day we decided to spread out, everybody sit at a different table. Would you believe those students went and threw their lunch away rather than sit at the same table with us? One day I was sitting in the corridor reading a book. This white guy walked up to me, called me a nigger, took his fist and hit me on the side of my head. We started fighting. Then the principal came running, and I was so happy to see that principal. It was some experience. One day in leaving physical education, 3 white guys blocked all the exit whereby I couldn't leave. They started pushing me against the wall. I have scars on my arm today to remind me of that event. I don't know how I got away, but when I got away, I went and told the teacher. All he did was just look at me and didn't say a word. The second year was not as bad the first year. However, it was no way an enjoyable experience. I was permitted to play basketball that year. I was the first and only black playing varsity sports in the state of South Carolina in 1965. Every place I went, there was only 2 blacks in the gym, the janitor and I. And I always made sure I spoke to that janitor. Many times my school would receive letters from other schools telling us they never had a nigger to play in their gym before. And if I came, they would hang me on an oak tree behind the gym. But I went to the games anyway. Because I was there for a purpose, and that was to tear down that wall of desegregation. Once we were playing Lancaster High School at their gym, I played a major part in our team coming from behind to win that game. When we left the school, there was a caravan of cars following us from Lancaster, and the driver accidentally turned down the wrong road to a dead end. Everybody jumped out of the van. My coach told me to stay in. And I could hear my teammates saying, well, he's a nigger, but he's our nigger. During my senior year, we were playing an undefeated team, Denfield High School, at their gym. In the last 3 seconds, I hit a shot, and I won the game. I could hear my schoolmates saying, well, too bad a nigger had to save the game. As you can see, my classmates were mean and very cruel. But we were there, as I said earlier, with a purpose. And that purpose was to make life, our society, better for everyone. The good news is, when I attended our 45th class reunion some years ago, it was a wonderful experience. It was the first time that I had a decent conversation with some of my old schoolmates. They came up to me and apologized for their behavior back then. You know, I was treated as if I was a popular rock star. Everybody wanted to come and talk to me at the same time. I truly, really did appreciate the new outlook my classmates had on life. As I grew older and had a chance to reflect on that experience in going to Orangeburg High School, my appreciation and respect for my parents grew 1,000-fold. Because if you look at what they did, they sacrificed their children so that our society would be a better place for everybody. Yesterday, when I came through your campus, I saw nationalities of students from every place. So it tells me that the sacrifice that we made was not in vain. As you know, our society still can get better. But now, it's up to you students to make this place a better place for everybody. I want to thank Dr. Baker again for having me. I'm going to pause and see if anyone have any questions. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Bree. I just want to say, do you consider yourself a hero?
No, I really don't. I view myself as a person that was committed to making life, and still am, better for everyone. And that really should be everyone's objective. If everyone have that particular objective, this world would be a better place.
I'm Kara. I was wondering what differences do you see today, like in the world?
Racism still exists. It's more subtle now than it was during that particular time period. But we have changed tremendously. I have 3 sons, and it brought joy to my house when I saw a lot of young boys come over to our house spending the night with them. I mean, it's what I had dreamt about when I was a kid at their age, that I would have that same kind of opportunity. Yeah, but it's much better, but we still have a long ways to go. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Lexi, and my question is, what did your parents think of what you were doing?
I didn't quite hear you, I'm sorry.
What did your parents think of what you were doing?
Well, my parents were proud of us. They supported us in everything that we were involved with. It's just part of our DNA was just to try to help others. And that's all we were doing. We're just trying to help other people to have equality, better education. And we were just using ourselves as an instrument to help bring that about. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Lexi, and my question is, were people more frightening back then, the reason for the protesting?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Were people more frightening back then, the reason for the protesting?
When you say frightened, what do you mean?
We were talking about it in class, just like we were just wondering if it was just, you described it so well, but was it frightening to walk down to the store? It was frightening in high school, so do people, how do you explain the change?
Well,
I'm not taking.
there are times when things can get challenging today, as it was back then. We lived in a isolated community, in the black community. So the only time you really experience white people is when you left the community. Going to Orangeburg High, yeah, we were nervous. Some people were really scared. But I just had faith that just knew everything was going to be all right. Going to the different high schools, even though they were writing letters threatening my life, I wasn't concerned about that. I guess the thing was the idea was larger than my personal feelings. The idea of freedom, was bigger than me.
We've been reading about how difficult it is for this generation to kind of, I guess, cope, is that a word? Just even with normal life and the kind of belief you have to have about yourself and all the ways that people can become anxious and depressed. How did, you've mentioned that focus on freedom, a focus on better outcomes, other people really helped you. Is that how you would put it? You had beliefs that sustained you?
Well, that's a good question. And let me share what happened with me. And I don't know how I got my hands on it, but as a kid, I remember reading the serenity prayer. Say, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I knew there was nothing that I could do to get my schoolmates to stop calling me out of my name. So that's something I had to accept. But the things that I could change, I focused on those, and I made those changes. That still exists today. In the business arena, You know, I mean, there was a time when it was a challenge to, say, to get a bank loan as a black-owned business person. But you study the system and you find out what you need to do to be successful in that environment, and then you apply it to your life.
Do you see people today having ideas that they're more fragile than they are? Like, do you look back on your experience and are you surprised by what people can't handle today?
Well, you know, exposure plays a big part, you know, to everything. And I'm sure it's in everybody, you know, if you had to do certain things to survive, you know, it'll come out. But when you are living in an environment where it's always comfort, you never had to push yourself. Well, maybe as a student, you know, you're preparing for your exams. I remember, you know, I never did think I was going to be able to stay up all night long to prepare myself for an exam. But I wasn't ready, so I stayed up the whole night and went and took that exam. So sometimes, you know, the circumstances can put you to do certain things that you wouldn't think you could do ordinarily. You know, as a father or as a mother, if you see something is getting ready to happen to your child, you'll get some energy from someplace to go rescue that child.
That's a great description. Do the people on Zoom, can they speak and ask questions?
Someone typed a question in the chat. It popped
Yeah,
up
I typed a question.
Okay, go ahead and speak.
Hey, my name's Colin. I was just wondering if those past experiences is what drove you to be who you are today. And what I really mean by that is, you know, if you didn't go first to the school and go through all those experiences, would you do what you are doing today?
Very good question. The answer is yes, it did. And let me tell you how. You see, when before going to Benedict College, I went to the University of South Carolina. And it was the third year the school was getting ready. And it was horrendous there also. My first job with, going to graduate school at the Medical University of South Carolina. You know, I was the first black to go into the graduate program, another young lady and I. So again, there's another first. When I started my career at DuPont in Richmond, Virginia, I was the first black engineer they had in that particular department. When I worked as an engineer for Southern Bell in Greenville, South Carolina, I was the first black engineer they ever had. So going through that experience, being the first, when I got into the professional arena, I knew how to handle myself because I knew how to communicate with people.
You sound so forgiving of people who have been so terrible to you, and maybe that's the secret of your success, but in your head, what was the explanation for the terrible racism? Just stupidity, or, I mean,
Well,
did you ever figure it out?
You know, not to start a history class,
We can use one.
but in order for slavery to be sanctioned in this country, blacks had to be classified as less than being a human being. And that thought, that concept, was passed down from generation to generation. I remember having a similar conversation with the PR person at DuPont when I was leaving the company. And I told him that basically all people are good. It's just that some people were taught bad things. And you just have to be sensitive toward knowing that you were taught bad things so that you can adjust your life. You see, don't get me wrong. There was a period in my life that I didn't like white people. I didn't like white people because of what happened to me. But I grew up and realized I was wrong in having those feelings. That's not how God made us. So you had whites with the slave mentality, slave master mentality, that idea of being passed down from generation to generation. You had blacks behaving a certain way because they had the slave mentality that was passed down from generation to generation. So it's a shackle you have to break. But you got to be sensitive to that in knowing that you may have been influenced in the wrong way as you were growing up.
But you had your parents as examples, and how did they work in your head? Like, was it their words that would make you strong? Was it their role model that would make you strong? Was it?
Well, my dad told me, son, do not let those people make you become like they are.
Okay, yeah.
And then he came back to me and said, son, you allow those people to make you become
Just keep it down.
like they were. So that kind of shook me, and made me rethink and reevaluate, my approach in life. But again, I mean, if we really take our time and talk to anyone in this room, you will find that we all have some goodness in us. And when I look at a person, I don't look for the bad part of them. I look at the good that's in them.
And you've seen people change.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Would you see people, like coworkers, would you see them change after meeting you? Like, would it be that fast, like a couple of years or something, and they'd seem very different as a result?
Well, yeah. It varies, from person to person. But I can say that I have established good relationship with people every place I went. And I didn't allow them to make me change from who I am. I am who I am. And I mean, that's how God made me. I can't help it.
Okay, let's get a few more questions from Zoom. You can just speak out.
I have a question. So my name is Asia, and after hearing your story about your life, like not only during like the civil rights movement, but just like in general with like your life outlook, I just want to know like what your outlook on like racism is today, and like also as well as like what your opinion was on the Black Lives Matter movement that just happened this past year.
Well, my opinion on Black Lives Matter is that Black lives do matter. And that we have to, as I indicated earlier, get people to recognize that maybe they are being influenced by some bad ideas that were passed down to them from generation to generation. So when you talk about Black Lives Matter, it's getting people to recognize, hey, we matter too. It's not just you, but we also matter. And so I think that when you look at racism in our society as a whole, it still exists, as I said earlier. But in time, it gets better and better. And we just got to continue to work toward making it better and better. It's not going to happen. It hadn't happened overnight, and it's not going to happen overnight. But there's no reason why we can't keep pushing it to make it better.
Okay, great question, Asia. We got another one?
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Of course, I experienced a lot of what he's with Pastor experienced. Of course, y'all invited him and not me, so I'm going to ask him the question, something I've been struggling with. Were you bitter then? Are you bitter now? How did you work through that?
I am not bitter at all today. I mean, zero. I mean, I love people. I really do. However, oh, by the way, Cal is a graduate of College of Charleston.
Yeah.
For sure.
When I started my freshman year in college, probably for 3 or 4 years, I was bitter. And when I left the University of South Carolina, I went to Benedict College. You know, Benedict was like a paradise. So it gave me a chance to really just sit around and think about things. And you know, one thing about college life, you have opportunity to get involved in all kind of discussions with the classmates and your roommates. So we would sit up late at night and just talk, philosophize. And then, you know, religion. I'm a spiritual person. You know, the story of the guy on the Jericho Road, you know, who needed help. You know, he had different nationalities passing him. But then someone stopped and helped him. And that's how I view myself. You know, I mean, I was injured, but God don't want us to behave in a negative fashion. He don't want us to walk around with bitterness. All you're doing is hurting yourself. You can't grow if you walk around mad at the whole world. You know, it comes out. I hope I answered the question.
It's amazing. Okay, I have one more connecting you to this new research. One thing about this book we're working on this semester is it kind of downplays microaggressions. Have you heard of those?
Downplay what?
Microaggressions. So it's not when someone's deliberately aggressive in a way that you would know, but it's like when they say something kind of sneaky that makes you feel bad later. It happens all the time, but you know, just a little rudeness or a little insult that you'll pick up later. And some of these psychologists are saying, get over it, it's not a big deal. But I feel like even one of my questions was bad because I'm sure, like, you don't want anyone to be hurt. Like, the way to get strong isn't through being hurt by other people, right? So it's like you've done something else and you wouldn't, like, there's no way you would wish your grandkids to go through what you went through. So I wonder sometimes if people who have made it through events like you have, which honestly, like, will you guys admit to this, is worse than like what Heracles went through. Like the ancient Greek tragedies aren't as bad as what you just described. I did not cry when I read about Heracles fighting the lion or whatever. But it doesn't, I wonder if you think it doesn't mean little teeny insults don't hurt young people today. And there might even be something about, you saw such huge big changes, but people today might be so close to a world of equality, but if it gets pulled away when you kind of have more promises, that can be painful too. I'm just wondering if you have sympathy for the racism people face today, even though it's not as in your face as it's in the 60s.
Well, I mean, I do, because there are barriers that people purposely set up in our society, you know, to stop people that are different from progressing. And, you know, it could be just making a small comment to someone else about a particular person. But yeah, I mean, I am sensitive toward that. And I guess, you know, the thing about living for a while, you develop a little patience. And you recognize that things are just not going to change overnight. And you appreciate the value that our forefathers went through in being patient when they were in the cotton fields and picking cotton, because they just knew that one day their offspring can be in the big house and not have to pick cotton. So, but little things, as we all know, can grow into big things. So you have to address the little things to keep it from becoming a big thing.
Yeah.
But I want to say that I truly appreciate, again, being here. It's been an honor for me to be in your presence. And I thank you all for the questions. And I look forward to seeing you guys making a difference in our society and moving forward. So I thank you.